And how are you going anyway today? I can see there's a storm happening in the background.
Oh my goodness, Paula, I know the biggest storm we've had here in quite a while. So hopefully it won't crack and um, shake the windows too much, but it'll create a little bit of extra ambience for us. We'll go with the flow.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's always, and that's where podcasts are so much fun because you just never know what's going to go on.
That's right.
I love it. I love it, and
That's
it
the joy
entertains
of
our
what we,
audience.
yeah, the joy of production. You've just
It
got to
is,
go with what you've
it,
got on the
and
day.
I'm every Yeah, and I'm speaking to the expert of that. That's for sure. Now, before we jump into our topic, how did your journey into creating content for children begin?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. Probably a little bit of a road less travelled, I think, for other colleagues that I have in the media space. I come from an early childhood teaching background. And when I was working with young kids quite a number of years ago, my passion was in the creative arts. I really loved visual arts based experiences and drama based experiences, first and foremost. So that was always a passion, being able to really draw out those creative ideas from young children that I worked with. That was in long daycare and preschool. And then I ventured across into the world of early years consultancy. I worked at a program at one of the universities in Sydney for a number of years. And that was a great opportunity because it gave me a chance to travel around New South Wales and meet lots of educators working every day with children. And I was talking about some professional development, big ideas, and linking to cross curriculum ideas as part of that project. And because we were a small team and we were state government funded, we were always trying to find creative ways to create resources on a little bit of a shoestring and create things in collaboration with educators and with children, and then publish those items online or use social media to distribute. So that was really my first foray into production. It was by way of that program. And I guess that really planted the seed for me. It really ignited a passion for production, for resource production first and foremost, planning ideas and springboards for educators to really take some big ideas a bit further as part of their everyday planning and practice. So, of course, when this job opportunity came up, I thought, oh my goodness, I would just die to do that job. It was such an incredible opportunity. It was stiff competition to get into it. But obviously they saw something in me at the ABC that was unique, and that's how I ended up here. So yeah, that's my journey, basically. Yeah.
Wow. And look, I know everyone's like, oh, wow, ABC, production media. Can you tell me a little bit about your role at the ABC? What do
Yeah.
you do there?
Yeah, sure. I wear a couple of different hats. My role is technically early childhood education producer. So I work as part of the content team with ABC Kids in the ABC Children's Department. I should actually say now children and families in our recent restructure where we're now called children and families, which is great officially. So I work really
Yes.
closely with our internal production teams and also with our commissioning teams to offer a perspective around production wherever that really valuable link comes into understanding how children think and child development and an understanding of early education philosophy and the early years curriculum, so our EYLF. So, of course, part of the charter of the ABC is to make sure that our content is engaging and entertaining and inspiring and educational as well. So that's how my role fits there as early education producer. And then as part of that, since I came and joined the team at the ABC, I worked to establish our early education platform, which is basically an extension of the ABC Children and Families family, if you like. So a new addition to the projects that we offer. And that's the early education platform. So that's me with very much my early childhood teaching hat on, thinking, okay, what would I find most useful if I was back in a classroom with a group of preschoolers? What content here would I be able to really pick up and run with? You know, what content do I value? How would I link it to the curriculum? And what additional tools might I need to use that content really well? So that's essentially my thinking in the establishment and now the maintenance of that early education website. And I do that in a very collaborative way with lots of fabulous colleagues and subject matter specialists from our wonderful early childhood sector. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I'm working in Perth at the moment.
Wow.
Oh, sorry. We've got a bit of a lag. Sorry, Paula. Yeah.
Are you right? There you go.
I was just going to quickly give my context.
I was just going to say. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, good.
Hilarious. I was just
Your turn.
Okay. I was going to give my context. So I'm based over in Perth, and my ABC Children and Families Department is over in Sydney. But of course, as a national organisation, we connect, you know, every day with our colleagues online. And that's pretty much how I've been doing my job for the past couple of years over here, and I'll be heading back over east next year. So that's how it all comes together. Yeah.
Wow. That's look, and I was just going to say, and what's amazing is 20 years ago, 30 years ago, what children did was all in front of the TV or on a radio. But now, as you're mentioning, we've got websites, we've got social media. So it's so great to hear that the ABC are doing that content, that education, that inspiring and engaging mindset across all those platforms, because, you know, we all know the age of children now is iPads, phones, and digital information.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So one of the things is utilizing those big ideas around where children are playing in their digital playground. I've probably heard that sort of terminology before, which I really love. And it's meeting them in those places and being in safe places for digital play and being able to extend opportunities there with children directly, sure, so via our apps and our different games that we have available through the ABC. But from my point of view, one of the most important things that I think of is how to really engage the educators around those follow-up play-based opportunities where you've had your screen time, you've had your opportunity to engage with a podcast or watch a great program or play a great game on your device, but then how does that spring you into ongoing learning and play and hands-on? So that's kind of really my passion. It's using that beautiful media content where children can see aspects of themselves or their families or their communities reflected in that content. That's really engaging, and then that's inspirational for follow-up learning and play. Yeah, that's me on my soapbox. That's my yeah.
And that's what we're here to share and that's so important for our audience, who can be a range. You know, we've got educators, managers, families, mums, dads, a whole range of people listening. So to share the back end of that as to why it's so important to have good social media, to have that secure place for children to visit. But like you said, that engaging content right through to classrooms, educators, and that sector-based learning.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic.
With the social media side of things, of course, at ABC Kids, we're not assuming we're actually planning for the opposite. We're not assuming that young children are using the social media. But what we do, like Facebook, for instance, but what we do is make sure that we're using that platform as a way to disseminate really useful resources and tools and ideas to the grown-ups in children's lives. And so that, you know, we can really be making sure that people are aware of what we have to offer and can pick up and run with things however it works best in their lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is, and that's. I was going to ask you. Obviously, we're talking about early learning years here, but what sort of age group do you cover? What's the target audience?
Yeah. Well, specifically, I think of children under 5, so in prior to school settings. So, you know, really thinking of children who are maybe just starting to watch a little bit of TV content, you know, maybe they're toddlers up until, you know, around the age of 5 or 6. Of course, when I think with an early childhood lens, of course, early childhood is birth to 8, needless to say. But if we just think of how we kind of categorize our different demographics, preschool content, we're really thinking of our 3 to 5s. But with ABC children
Yep.
and families, we're thinking of any young person up until around the age of 16, young adults. That's kind of where we go up to.
Oh,
So
yeah.
from cradle to kind of teen
Wow.
years. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and all of those years are important in that social
Yeah.
media space these days, and that safe place for them.
Yes.
But and I know and when we've been talking prior to the podcast, one of the biggest hits of the ABC has to be Play School.
Yeah.
I'm older, and I remember Play School, Big Ted, Jemima. Wow, that is such a iconic Australian show. And are we able to talk about Play School and Bluey's to begin with? And they are a hit. I mean, Bluey's now, and Play School is just there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just need to watch children engaging with those episodes. Why is it a hit?
Yeah, well, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? So both of them, I mean, so popular for different reasons, but there are those common denominators for sure. So Play School, for context, that's been running for, like 57 years now. It's coming up to the 60th anniversary of the program
Yeah.
in a couple of short years. So that's very cool. And Bluey has, absolutely blitzed the Australian and now the global market as well. So what is it, right? Like that's the $1 million question. What is it about those programs?
Yeah.
I think, Paula, it just comes down to the connection with play. I mean, hooray. It's really that connection with how children engage and enjoy the world and experience the world and learn about the world. So I think play is absolutely the common denominator. They work around play in different ways, each program. So with Bluey, you've got stories that revolve around, beautiful little play situations, relatable play situations in the home, things that make you laugh, things that make you cry. But it is rooted in play, which is great. And Play School, of course, is centered around play-based learning and always has been. So I think that's one of the first pieces. That's one of the first ingredients in our special sauce, I think, of what makes those two programs so successful, and that hits that kind of note around quality. It's that connection to really meaningful play-based experiences. I think we've got that universal appeal with both of the shows. I mean, particularly Bluey, because it has really gone global and it's been picked up by networks all around. But I think what we've got there is a unique Australian sensibility, obviously that our Australian audience really relates to. The turn of phrase, the voice, the humour, the relatable little experiences, all the references that we can relate to so beautifully. So Bluey does that certainly through storytelling, and Play School does that in different ways through song and storybook reading and just the way the presenters are scripted and the natural way that they present. So I think we've really got that, that celebration of Australian culture through both of the shows. And of course, with the early learning component, that's another really important reason as to why they are successful. I think the ideas around early learning and little life lessons being wrapped up in something that just feels so entertaining and joyful and just so much fun to watch. So you're learning things, but you don't realize it. Children would walk away from it, and there'll be new language that they've picked up or new big ideas that they've picked up. And that's all part of being engaged and being entertained. And it's also part of your holistic sort of education around in the world, I suppose. Yeah. So I could probably go on.
Yeah, I hear you, because it's fun.
Yeah,
no, feel free. This is such an amazing topic, because Bluey and Play School are iconic Australian they're in our culture, they're in our psyche, right? Those, it's just amazing. And I know so many people out there who are listening to you and resonating about, you know, the way that the learning happens and it's fun filled, that they don't realize they're learning. Where
Yeah.
I know people that sort of say, hey, what would Bluey do? What would Bluey think? How would
Oh,
Bluey react? So it's, yeah, which is amazing.
yeah.
When you think about the impact on a child's behaviour from a character.
Yeah, that's right. And it's the parents in that show, you know, Bandit the dad and Chili the mum. You know, it's really that case of, okay, well, what would Bandit or Chili do? And the thing about them is they're imperfect, you know, they're not doing things exactly the right way all the time. They kind of stuff up sometimes and, you know, so it's totally relatable. But they're also incredibly successful parents. They have a beautiful relationship with their two little girls, Bingo and Bluey. And I think they do feel like,
Yeah,
you know, parent goals, you know, dad goals or mum goals, you
yeah,
know, just, you know,
yeah, yeah,
caregiver goals. If we want to be really inclusive, it's just a joy to watch, and I think makes Australians feel super proud that the shows Bluey and Play School are our shows, you know, and are put out by our national broadcaster.
yeah.
So it's really special. Yeah.
It is. It is so special, and it's, look, I would say it's like a phenomena almost.
Oh, totally.
But
Yeah.
as you said, it's that recipe,
Mm. Yeah, we often talk
that
about the
recipe that
special
you
sauce.
mentioned earlier.
Yeah, yeah, we do. We often use that
Yeah,
as an analogy because it does make sense. You know, often it's a case of putting in some delicious, healthy vegetables into your bolognese sauce. So, and those healthy vegetables might be
all
your,
mixed up.
yeah, your little learning elements and things that you don't need to hide them, but they add to the flavor, you know, and, you know, I think it's just all part of the mix, right? It's what makes something feel good to
Yeah,
consume. So I think a food metaphor
uh,
works really quite well. Yeah.
it does. It does, and we all know there are fussy children eaters out there, fussy eaters out there. So even Bluey helps with that.
Yes, that's right. You
Yeah,
do
I
have
look.
to be quite
Yeah,
discerning as a consumer of media. So, you know, fussy media consumers, I like them. You know, whether they're grown ups or children, I think good for you. Know what you like, you know. Yeah.
and that recipe again, you know, it's a dash of Australian in there, right?
Yeah, totally.
Which is fantastic. I mean, it's seriously just wonderful. I mean, I grew up with Play School when I probably was not far off at starting, to be honest. And then my kids, and then, you know, moving through, and then now my friends' grandkids and things are just, it's just a beautiful show to watch. But it's so good to understand that it is coming from that space of teaching, educating in a playful way.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
well. And I'm sure there's, you know, all those educators out there that are really keen to use that media in their classes.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Now,
it's proving so.
what
So that's great. Yeah. Sorry.
what learnings about media production and entertainment can we pass to an early learning service? Is there a recipe or something we can follow as a sector?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's so simple. I think the first thing, or maybe we can simplify it. Let's try. Okay. So I think, first of all, it's really getting to know with whatever time you might have available, it's just getting to know what's available and what's out there. Um, and I won't shamelessly just keep spruiking the ABC. I mean, I'd love to because that's my favorite, but there is a lot out there on a lot of different platforms. So find out what you like. The good thing about the ABC, of course, is that there's so many big brains working behind the scenes to really curate the content and make sure what we're putting out there is really tapping into a range of different key touch points in an early childhood world, I suppose. So content that might respond to language and literacy outcomes, content that responds to how children's big imaginations work, and, you know, live action content and cartoon animated content, and having a really good spread of what's there. So I think that's a really good place to start for early educators who are keen to kind of dive in. The early education website does really help to support the sector around that discovery journey. So it's a really great starting point if you haven't spent too much time investigating what sort of content might be out there for you to use as part of your program. So it really is a discovery journey to start with. I think then it's really engaging and feeling good about the things that really resonate with you, because if that content is resonating with you as an educator, think about why. You know, what is it about that program that you value deeply, and how can you apply that to your work context, and why do you think that content is really worth children's valuable time? That's how I like to see it from an early education perspective, because there is so much there. Children do engage with a lot at home in many cases. So what can you value add as part of your ongoing program? What can you extend on as part of your, play-based learning program? And what will link in really naturally and beautifully to the various outcomes of the EYLF. I think the other thing that I would suggest for early childhood educators is to just keep your ears open and listen, listen to what children are coming to you with around their engagement with media at home. Sometimes it's hard not to notice, because they'll come in with T-shirts, plastered with faces of favourite characters, so that's easy. But I think it's more, can you observe little things that are happening in their play that might have emerged from a program? Are they playing out different characters from favourite shows? And what could you do to extend on that? So listen and observe, just like we do with all other aspects of our planning with children, and see those media inspirations as being just as valuable as other things that we follow up on around children's interests in our classrooms, whether it's with little toddlers in a nursery and following up on play school songs that they might be learning for the first time, little nursery rhymes, or whether it's your preschoolers who are heading off to school and are playing out a really complex Bluey scenario in the cubby house. There's lots of ways that we can be extending. Yeah. I think they're my main things.
And I always think that.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking, when you had mentioned that cubby house thing, back to early learning, you've got that, the play school connection of the bear hunt. That's I always remember that part of it. It's just, so amazing to connect that, and just you saying that, I feel it. So if I'm feeling, I'm sure our audience and our educators are connecting with that as well.
Yeah. I could just say one more thing on that, Paula, is what I feel like happens is it becomes like a cycle of play. So often it's not always the program that's the TV program that's infiltrating your planning and the children's thinking. It's cyclical, right? So, with Bluey, a lot of that inspiration came through the relationships that the show creator, Joe, had with the Early Learning Centre of his kids at the time. There's a cycle, and with play school, I think that's been reported in a few different great readings that you can do around Bluey. It's really a reflection on his experience in a lot of ways with raising his own little children. And with play school, there have always been early childhood educators involved in behind the scenes production of the show. So they've used their knowledge of early childhood practice to inform the show, and then the show goes out, and therefore you create this cycle where then the consumers of the show can play out those ideas again and adapt them and change them. So I think it's really important to consider that, because I think sometimes we can feel like, oh, well, if it doesn't feel like it's entirely coming from the child's sort of interest in the first place, is it really valuable? Can we kind of follow up if it's purely, more of a teacher-led kind of opportunity. They've identified a piece of content and they want the children to follow up. But I think just recognising the journey, the production journey that some of these programs go on, it's just really fascinating, I think, from an early childhood education point of view. Yeah.
And look, I agree, absolutely fascinating. And even I've just learned about that back end of the programs is where you're gathering your information, your content, all of that. It's so collaborative.
Yes, very much so. Very collaborative processes. That's a lot of what I do in my day-to-day work. It's just connecting with people around various projects, and there's so much wonderful knowledge and expertise in our early years sector, and obviously in the world of media as well. But to be able to combine those two worlds is such a joyful thing, and it creates some really awesome outcomes. And that's sort of what we see, by way of these really successful programs. So that's something for early childhood educators also to feel just very valued, I suppose, in the knowledge base that we have and how important it is around the creation of popular culture. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, it is. And like, not just, it's like I said, a phenomena, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And all that from that collaborative approach from Play School, 57 or 58 years ago
Yeah, back 57.
to Bluey now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Oh, look, and it is such a and obviously, ongoing. There's going to be other recipes and other shows that come forward that will grow. As our children grow and our next generations as well. Look, and looking forward for the sector, what do you think would be the big issues in terms of environmental impact for early learning?
Yeah, that's a big question. Maybe I'll just harness one to start with. I think, with changing weather patterns, I think that that's something I've really seen in the work that I have been doing with ABC Kids Early Education. In the 5 or so years that I've been working on the project now, we've gone through times of, extreme bushfire events, extreme flooding and storm events. And I think those types of events, with that bigger picture kind of environmental change going on, the emotional impact of that on early childhood development and the way that we engage with children and families around those types of situations that are occurring more often, and properly helping to equip children and families with the tools that they might need to build resilience around those things that are happening more often in our world. So that's probably one big picture thing that I would have in mind. Of course, there'd be all sorts of other things just around the day-to-day running and connections to sustainable practice and all of those sorts of things that I know early childhood educators, if they've got that really great leadership support, they're really thinking about how important it is to connect to sustainable practice in their ongoing work with children, reducing the amount of disposable, garbage waste and the value of upcycling and all of that stuff. And needless to say, for another shameless Play School plug, I mean, that's been something that Play School has been doing since kind of it started, particularly through the 80s.
It started, absolutely.
Recycling and the amount of waste that could come out of a preschool each day and how important it is to be, reusing as much of that stuff as we possibly can. But yeah, I suppose they're two quite different things. So that big picture idea of just our home environments and that feeling of being a little bit out of control sometimes when it just comes to dealing with those extreme weather events. And then that more day-to-day thing of, well, how do we think about prevention longer term, like into the next kind of 100 years? What are all of the little things that we can be doing with young children to help build up that sense of environmental responsibility and create that next generation of little greenies, little people who care about their environment and care about their footprint. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, yeah, and it is. Yeah, that's and that's so important because I mean, as we grow older, obviously, we need to leave the world in a better place.
Yeah.
For those coming through and those generations, and that green, that carbon footprint you're talking about, that little footprint. Let's make sure we're doing the right thing. And it's not about whether we agree on climate change or whatever that is. It's actually about making the world better.
Yeah, exactly. And little steps, not making children feel overly anxious or overly responsible, that they're personally responsible for, changing the outcomes of the future, because I think that children do think in very literal ways often, don't they? So we just need to be careful around our messaging there,
Yes,
and make sure that we're really communicating the idea that it's really our job as a working together, to make sure that things are kind of done in a way that will help our environment in future. And all of those little things that we can all do will make a difference. So, yeah, I think there's lots of
yeah.
great work being
And
done
look, at one thing,
in space. Yeah.
yeah, and you did touch on that the responsibility doesn't fall onto the children. It's actually our responsibility as well, and we don't want to push an anxiety onto a child that doesn't need to be there either.
No, no, definitely not. But I think building that sense of a environmental conscious, I guess, if you like, or to sort of feel as though you're um, like you'd feel uncomfortable if you saw somebody else tossing out a piece of rubbish from their car. Like that'd be something that you would want to pick up on, and make sure that that person knows they've done the wrong thing, and that you would never dream of doing a thing like that. So I think all of those little messages
That's
that we could be sending, so that children just have that shared understanding right from the start of the sorts of things that are the do's and the things that really are that, well, let's try very hard not to do that, and we know why. We're not just being told something and we don't have any understanding. There's a little bit of a knowledge base being built just gently over time, where children can feel as though they're building an understanding around what being a responsible environmental citizen of the world can look like. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that, like you said, that comes through in play school. I haven't seen Bluey because I don't have children that age, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll be in there as well.
There's little things.
That
Yeah, there's little
responsibility.
things peppered through. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh wow! Look, that's such a great view, and that taking on board that it's a society responsibility, not let's look at the next generation, they can fix it. It's actually about all of us in it together. And
Yes.
now, look, before we finish up, we love to ask people about personal mottos. I love wise words. Do you have anything that you'd like to share with us that's your favourite quote or wise word, Laura?
It's an on the spot question, Paula. Oh my goodness me. Um,
It,
yeah.
it can be anything.
Yeah. Well, I've got one that's a little bit like if someone gives you lemons, you make lemonade, but it's kind of a bit of a variation on a theme. So I think it goes something along the lines of, be like a little flower, survive the rain, but use it to grow. I love it. I just think it's beautiful.
Oh, look, that's so sweet.
I love it because do you know what? I just
And
think that is a really concrete one for an adult with a bit of a child at heart kind of sensibility, which is certainly me. But also it's a little quotable quote that I
me.
think a young child understands. It's a relatable little philosophy that, you could talk to a preschooler about if they're having a pretty hard sort of day or something disappointing has happened. You could say to them, be like a little flower. It might feel like it's really raining hard on you now, but you know what? You can use that rain and you can grow up more tomorrow and Anyway, squeaky
It's so
clean.
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is squeaky clean, but it's also all of us can use that. That's such a wonderful, wise word, as I
Well,
call them.
good.
And look, and thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wise words, your thoughts, and your wisdoms, and or to also all of our audience that will appreciate listening to you today, Laura, and have in their youth and in their childhood have got the bit of blueies and the bit of play school, and maybe their children today. So look, thank you very much, and remember, we can all be a flower with a little bit of rain sometimes.
Oh, I love that. That's a beautiful way to end. Paula, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.